The world is dying, your people are scattered, and hope is fleeting. An otherworldly menace is spreading across the land, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. This is the backdrop for Songs of Silence, an upcoming indie darling from Chimera Entertainment. It combines turn-based strategy, deck building, 4x scale empire management, and real-time auto-battling combat. This ambitious combination of genres should result in some kind of Frankenstein's monster conflict of ideas, but it doesn't. The final result is gorgeous. So let's march forward, retinue in tow, and have a look at what this unique little game has to offer. I'm gonna jump in with the aspect of Songs of Silence that'll hit you first. The visuals and art design are great. There's so much personality in the world, the characters and the setting. That same attention to detail spills over to the UI, the menus, all the little sections that have no right looking so good. The game's world and story are front and center. In the campaign, you take charge of Lorelei, a young queen whose nation was put to the sword by an unearthly invasion. In your quest to find a place and purpose for your citizens, you'll travel the world, form alliances, and attempt to combat the all-consuming silence. I don't want to go too far into any major details about the story surrounding the game, because of spoilers and all that, but it is very well done. The creators have put a lot of thought into this conflicted world and come up with something that's surprisingly deep, without being overbearing. The campaign is the platter in which all the game's key systems and features are presented. On the world level, you'll traverse the continent, discovering lands unknown and taking control of cities, usually by a show of force. These can be upgraded and expanded, and act as hubs for you to reinforce and strengthen your army. Combat is pretty unique here. You'll set up your formation, initially, but once you get into a fight, things are out of your hands. Well, mostly. You can't control your units directly. They'll go ahead and engage the enemy in whichever way makes sense to them. But you can impact things with combat cards and spells. These range from rallying your cavalry to charge on a point, to just throwing down a stonking great meteor to break your opponent's formation. As you emerge victorious, you'll earn experience and level up your character, adding new cards to your battle deck. Or you might choose to pick up something that adds city improvements to your empire. There's a lot of moving parts that run the risk of interfering with each other, but it all feels fluid. Now, that is helped in large by the story-driven angle. You're drawn in and you have trackable objectives. Everything is voice acted, the world feels alive, and the sound design is excellent. The OST is composed by Hitoshi Sakamoto, a name which should be familiar to Final Fantasy and JRPG fans. You're presented with mechanics little by little, so it's easy enough to digest. But that did get me thinking as to how the game plays without the story doing the heavy lifting. Enter the Skirmish mode. Just like the next person, I enjoy a good story, but with a game like this, the Skirmish is where it's at for me. The version Chimera sent over for me to test had a little bit more going on compared to the demo, and it's an intriguing experience, leaning more into the 4X side of the game's design. The world map is littered with towns, cities, and points of interest for you to send your armies to and ransack. Liberate. You can add modifiers to change up the map, and if you want, separate the world into two planes. One is lovely, verdant, bountiful, and picturesque. The other is a hellscape, full of towering, horrible monsters. They're linked by this very ominous portal, which at some point you'll have to lead your entire army into. You'll choose between 3 different heroes to lead your empire, be that the Hierophant who smites his foes with heavenly fury, the High Lord who fights in the thick of the fray, or the Hockmeister, who has a giant flying bull. Now, it's worth mentioning that the full release will see 2 more factions added, and I'm assuming 3 more heroes with each, meaning there will be a very solid roster to pick from. How this differs from your standard turn-based game is pacing. Things happen very quickly. Catch an opponent off guard and you can seize their city and cut off an important part of their empire in a matter of turns. You're getting straight to the point and clashing head first with your opponents. Worth noting, the peaceful path isn't an option here, and you'll be constantly locked into war with the entire continent. While I consider myself a diplomatic man in most cases, this approach has a major benefit, mainly being there's no beating around the bush. You're not looking for a long-winded victory through wearing down your foe. No, you have to strike first and strike hard, lest they do the same to you. Your standard 4X game will probably take up a sizable chunk of your life to maintain. But here, you can get a similar experience of leading a nation to glory, but it will only eat up a couple of hours of your time. While playing Songs of Silence, I kept thinking, how would I summarize this game in one sentence? An empire management game with autobattler combat, a kingdom-sized story with overworld exploration and deck building, a condensed grand strategy that puts visual and audio design front and center. Whichever way I looked at it, I was missing some part of the game's DNA. This many ideas floating around should create something confusing and sprawling and convoluted, but it doesn't. It's all tied together so neatly. It doesn't dive too deep into any one aspect, instead it offers up a smorgasbord of game concepts that click together. The best way I found to think of it, or the skirmish mode at least, is that it feels like a board game. All the game's concepts can be learned pretty quickly, and while there's a good amount of depth under the surface, you won't be spending too much of your time getting stuck into one mechanic or another. If that all sounds appealing, go ahead and give it a go. There's a demo available on Steam, which sees you through the first chapter of the story. It's a very unique experience which could grow into a wholly special game.